This is DW News live from Berlin. The German Chancellor talks security. Olaf Scholz is due to brief German lawmakers about threats facing the country. His speech comes just days after Berlin gave the green light to Ukraine to use German weapons to attack targets inside Russia. We're going to bring you Scholz's speech live. I'm Gerhard Elfers. Welcome to the program. Germany's Chancellor is about to make a statement in Parliament on the nation's security situation. Olaf Scholz is expected to address the war in Ukraine, following his permission for Ukraine to use German weapons to strike targets inside Russia. Domestic security will likely also be discussed in the wake of a knife attack that killed a police officer. Scholz's statement will be followed by a debate led by the opposition CDU party and their chairman, Friedrich Merz. Our chief political editor, Michaela Küfner, is in the Bundestag. Michaela, what can we expect from Scholz's speech there?
Well, we expect him to speak about security, external and internal security, and that means particularly the situation on potential sendbacks of rejected asylum seekers to Afghanistan. That's a very heated debate here in Germany. Since last week, a young Afghan man stabbed several people. One policeman, a 29-year-old, then died shortly afterwards due to his injuries. And that has sparked a whole new debate here on whether Germany's decision not to send back people to Afghanistan since the Taliban took back power there in 2021 is one that is sustainable. It doesn't appear so politically. We've learned that the Interior Minister is also looking into potential legal options referring to that particular issue. And the big question debated here in Germany now is whether the Chancellor himself will comment on this, whether he will announce some kind of action being taken. And this statement by the Chancellor is also being followed by a debate about political Islam here in Germany. So a very heated context. At the same time, there is this turnaround in his policy towards Ukraine, allowing Ukraine now to use German-made weapons, also to strike military targets on Russian territory. And now we're hearing Bärbel Bas announce the Chancellor to speak. Yeah, let's listen in.
Frau Präsidentin, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, meine Damen und Herren.
Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen.
Lassen Sie mich zu Beginn eines klar sagen.
At the beginning, I want to be clear about something. Many people in our country are waiting in anticipation of the football European Championships at home and guests and players coming from all over Europe. I'm convinced that our country will show its best side during this summer of football. Everybody is prepared. I gave myself an impression of this. Also, our security authorities are convinced of a good situation. And I want to say, all citizens, please don't let anyone take away the joy and anticipation to this football celebration in the summer, even though many things have been happening in these days that concerns us. The violent death of a policeman in Mannheim really affected us and triggered a wave of solidarity and compassion all over the country. In the south of our country, a dramatic flooded houses and streets. There were casualties, and it's the third devastating flood in Germany since the beginning of this year. At the same time, the brutal Russian war of aggression against the defenseless civil society and civilian population in Ukraine is exacerbating, especially in the metropolis of Kharkiv. These events and developments might not be in a direct context with one another, but they are keeping us busy. They are raising questions. They make us uncertain, every event in an isolated way, but also put together. Justifiably, citizens want to know what the situation is and what the federal government does to react, and I want to give some answers today. The most important answer is everybody, each and every one in our country, needs to be able to live without being afraid of their fellow citizens. This is the central promise of our state of rule of law. We will enforce this promise with all the power we have. This is the task of our security forces and the justice authorities. They can rely on the full support of my government and, I'm sure, this parliament. All the more shaken I am, we are all shaken and shocked by what has happened in Mannheim. The deadly knife attack on a young policeman is an expression of an ideology that is enemy to humanity, a radical Islamism. There's only one term for it: terror. And we will fight terror and terrorism. Regardless of whether it has an Islamist motive, as in Mannheim, whether it comes from the far right or the far left, whether it counters Germans, foreigners, Christians, Muslims or Jews. The target is always the same. Terrorism wants to cause fear and terror. It wants to intimidate us and wants to impose its worldview on us. It wants to infringe on our liberty to say what we think, what our opinion is, no matter whether others like it or not. The liberty to espouse our convictions, even if others don't agree. The freedom, the liberty to live without fear, no matter what we think in terms of policy, what we believe in, who we love, or where we come from. Without these liberties, there is no democracy. And that's why I say not those need to fear in Germany who want to live in freedom and liberty and peace. Those need to fear who attack our liberty and who disturb our peace. Those who attack our freedom and disturb our peace, they have me and this federal government and the rule of law as their most decisive opponents. Many of us saw the video from last Friday from Mannheim, this cruel knife attack on this young, heroic policeman, Rowan L. He gave his life for our freedom and our security. We have a sinking feeling in our hearts. In these hours, we are full of compassion with his family and friends. We are compassionate with his colleagues who attended a really moving commemorative event in Mannheim on Monday. We think about all the policemen and women all over the country who are in mourning, who are collecting tokens of affinity for the bereaved of Rowan L. in this time of grief. I would like to say to all of you, in all of our name, we are compassionate. We stand behind you and we stand behind our police. Everyone who protects us, as you are doing on an everyday basis, need to receive protection themselves. They have deserved us. Those who kill a policeman need to be punished very strictly. The fact that the Federal Prosecutor General has taken over the investigation shows that our state is taking such crimes very seriously. Those who want to ambush people who help and want to save lives need to feel the hardness of our law. We will exacerbate our criminal law in a very targeted way in order to punish such ambushes harder. This also holds true for the protection of our democracy and our democracy living. I'm thinking about the attacks on our colleagues Roderich Kiesewetter, Matthias Ecke in Dresden, Heinrich Koch in Mannheim, or Kai Gehring and Rolf Flies in Essen. Those who insult politicians, mayors, members of regional parliaments, people who make a commitment to our cities and municipalities for the common good, they need to be punished more strictly. Such deeds, such acts will not be accepted. Already today, there's the possibility to have zones for the prohibition of weapons and knives. This needs to be taken to the next level. We need to make use of this option more consequently. The federal police is enforcing this at stations, railway stations, and we also need this at a federal level, especially at hotspots and large events. There is not no rule of using your fist in Germany, and those who disagree will get a massive problem with the police and the justice authorities. This holds true for those who have always been living in Germany, as well as for those who came to Germany recently, in recent years. And I want to be clear and without resentment. This is really important to stress. In Germany, more than 20 million citizens with a migration story live. They are neighbors, colleagues, fellow school pupils and friends. They are appalled and shocked by the horrible act in Mannheim. They are also victims of violence and are also being intimidated and threatened by Islamists. But above all, they are part of our society. We won't let anyone divide us. By the way, we can be proud of the fact that this is also reflected in our national football team. They are all Germans, they are all our boys. This is why it's really far-fetched and infamous to put a general suspicion on 20 million of women and men who misuses acts as in Mannheim like this will stoke dissent in our cohesion. This is a detriment to our nation. But also, let me be clear about something else. I'm appalled and indignated when somebody commits a crime who sought protection in this country. Thus, such criminals need to be deported, even if they come from Syria or Afghanistan. Heavy criminals and terrorist people posing a threat to public security don't have a place here. In such cases, the security interest of Germany is more important than the protective interest of the perpetrator, which is why the Federal Ministry of Internal Affairs is looking for legal and practical ways of how this can be accomplished. The Federal Ministry of Internal Affairs is working on making deportation of criminals and dangerous people to Afghanistan possible. And when it comes to the practical information, the ministry is talking to neighboring countries of Afghanistan. We cannot accept when terrorist deeds are glorified or celebrated. This is a hit in the face of victims and their loved ones and our democratic order, which is why we will intensify, exacerbate our expulsion rules so that the condonement of terrorist deeds will also justify an interest for expulsion. Who glorifies terrorism, and this is in breach of all our values, need to be deported. In 2 weeks' time, the Ministers of Internal Affairs of the Federal States will deliberate this topic, and I'm quite thankful for the Hamburg Senator of Internal Affairs for his initiative. Colleagues, for protection and security, we need personnel. the federal government has intensified the efforts of the federal police with 1,000 additional policemen and policewomen per year. This also strengthens internal security in Germany, and we're strengthening the federal police even more. We have just taken care that nobody is getting the German passport who comes to our attention due to anti-Semitism and Islamism. Extremists with a German passport are countered by the rule of law in a consequent way, also in terms of criminal law and freedom of association. When it comes to Hamas and Samidun, we need to be more consequent. Extremists without a German passport can be deported faster than before, and the message is clear: who abuses our protection, as has the perpetrator of Mannheim, has no longer a right to this protection. There's a zero tolerance when it comes to that. Colleagues, when we are talking about the security in our country, we are thinking about those who have been affected by the flood in Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg, as well as the search and rescue helpers. On Monday, I went to Reichertshofen in Bavaria, a place that has been hardest hit. One of the inhabitants there told us masses of water were approaching. We'd never seen anything like this. The citizens of Reichertshofen, but also in other places along the rivers Ilm and Donau, Danube and its estuaries, have never seen the force of nature as now. The water level grew by the minute and dams broke. Helpers who were totally at the end of their tether had to be recovered because they couldn't do it anymore. And also there was the very terrible and lamentable message of the death of one fireman in Pfaffenhofen. This is now the sixth confirmed death, and 7 more people are missing. We hope that they will be recovered alive and that the situation will get better soon. But those affected in the flood areas also witnessed something else, a flood of helpfulness. Tens of thousands of forces were deployed in Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg. Also spontaneous helpers, neighbors who helped pump out cellars and remove mud. Friends and colleagues who offer a bed for the night or some food or dry clothing. Everybody who's lending a helping hand to all of those despite their exhaustion. I want to say a heartfelt thanks. For me, those are also these images of solidarity and humanity that these days are characterized by. This is Germany. We are strong when we stand together. This is a really important message that we derive from this difficult situation. In emergencies, the federal government needs to be sure that it can act. And in recent days, we have seen that our country works. The federal government helps municipalities and districts with the technical relief agency, soldiers of the Bundeswehr, the federal police, and the Federal Office for Emergency Relief. What these men and women have accomplished during the last few days, Germany can be proud of this, and the cooperation worked hand in hand. Warning system and apps worked out well and saved lives. We will stick to this lived practice of solidarity when it comes to clearing the damage. In situations of emergency, we get closer together, and this is something we should do. This is Germany. Colleagues, the flood in the south of Germany is really bad luck and an extraordinary natural disaster. But when such extreme weather events happen more often, it's not only bad luck, it's a result of climate change. Man-made climate change is the largest global challenge we are presented with. This is a challenge that for this federal government was highest priority from day one and still has. This year alone, I went to flooded areas 4 times already, from Lower Saxony to Bavaria, from Saxony-Anhalt to the Saarland, and we need to be better prepared for such disasters all over the country. And this is what we're doing. We make great financial funds, federal funds available for increasing coastal protection and flood protection in the central areas, and also flood polders and retention basins need to be involved, even if not everybody likes this. We put a national flood program into practice, and together with the federal states and municipalities, we implement the national water strategy and the action program for natural climate protection. And one of the major targets with this is to prepare the water household for extreme weather events. Also, we adopted the Climate Adaptation Act almost a year ago, and we provided, by doing so, the framework for federal government, states and municipalities when it comes to climate adaptation. And we help via the Center for Climate Adaptation with funding programs. When it comes to elementary damage insurance, we're also making programs. During my meeting with heads of government of the federal states on the 20th of June, we will put this on our agenda, because owners of houses and flats need to get insurance for elementary damage. Ladies and gentlemen, still there are flooded houses and streets and railway tracks, and the damage control has not taken place yet, but we already know that the extent of the damages will be great. The same holds true for the floods in Saarland, Rhineland, Palatinate, Lower Saxony and Saxony-Anhalt, and last year along the Baltic Sea. We will assess the damages together with the federal states, and we will organize relief. At the end, I want to say a few words about the question of security that many citizens attach equal importance to, as to the flood and the horrible knife attack in Mannheim. I'm talking about Russia's war against Ukraine and how it impacts us in Germany. We all are compassionate with the attacked Ukrainians, the children that are killed by Russian bombs, the dads that fall at the front line. At the same time, many citizens fear that the war might escalate further, that safety, security and peace might also be threatened here. To be concerned about peace, this is not naive, this is not strange, as sometimes some people suggest. We should take our citizens' concerns seriously. I certainly do. As Federal Chancellor, I am responsible to make sure that no child that is now born in Germany will ever have to witness war in our country. This is my absolute top priority. Securing peace does not mean to raise the white flag, to surrender before violence and injustice. Peace doesn't mean insubordination, subordination. That's not what it means. And also I want to say this to the hecklers from the AfD. This is really inadequate to comment when we talk about this question. This is really embarrassing that you have received great praise from the Russian president today. And I would like to add, you really prepared for this situation, and the citizens will know how to evaluate this. Russia is trying to steal land from Ukraine. If we accepted this kind of imperialism, then And especially then, our security would be in danger, and the security of all of Europe as a consequence, because a dangerous principle would hold sway that steeped Europe in ignominy, in bad situations for hundreds of years. The principle to move borders by means of violence, but we won't accept the return of war as a means of politics anymore. This is what it's about. Securing peace today means that we support Ukraine, its independence and sovereignty, and defending its independence and sovereignty. Germany is doing this in a very decisive way. Next week, there will be a large international reconstruction conference together with Ukraine here in Berlin. You know that we provide more support than all other countries in Europe. Help that is needed, that reaches where it's needed and that is effective. Help and support that we are reassessing constantly since the beginning of the war, that we extend and adapt. Also due to the fact that the war and where it takes place is permanently changing. Russia opened up a new front line last week. Kharkiv, an Ukrainian metropolis not far from the Russian border, is being fired with glide bombs and missiles. Houses, malls, schools and factories are hit, but especially innocent civilians, women, men and children. We coordinated closely with our allies how we will react to this, as usual, and together we reiterated that Ukraine has the enshrined law, according to international law, to defend its territory and its cities and citizens against attacks. This also goes for attacks on the area of Kharkiv that are attacked from Russia from positions in the directly adjacent Russian border territory. In order to be able to defend against such attacks, Ukraine can also use the weapons delivered by us and our allies in agreement with international legal obligations. And at the same time, I am saying it is the right thing to do to again and again and again closely cooperate with our partners and allies before taking such far-reaching decisions, that we act prudently, that we weigh up all the risks accurately. And I stand with this word as Federal Chancellor, to whom peace and the security of Germany is very important. Citizens can rely on this. This is why we need a strong Bundeswehr, Federal Armed Forces, that makes sure that nobody dares to attack us. And yes, peace also needs diplomacy, strenuous, small steps. And this is why I will travel to the Peace Summit for Ukraine and Switzerland next week. There won't be any peace negotiations there. We are far from that, as long as Russia still believes to be able to accomplish its goals in the battlefield. But as in the past, I will continue to work on integrating countries worldwide to make something clear for Moscow. We stand with the international law and the Charter of the United Nations. So it's Russia's task now to withdraw troops and clear the way for a just peace. That's also what peace politics is about in the year 2024. This is what peace politics is about at times of the Zeitenwende. Ladies and gentlemen, without security, all else is nothing. This sentence is of great importance to me, because where there's no security, fear will grow. Fear of citizens, of each other, fear for external threats, fear of the future, fear that dissolves trust and confidence. This is the very reason why security and safety are the keys for everything else. That's why I'm so convinced security is the mainstay of our freedom, our democracy, and our rule of law. And this is especially the reason why the federal government clearly braves all threats that endanger the security of our country. And All citizens can rely on this.
And that was German Chancellor Olaf Scholz addressing the German Parliament on security issues that the country is currently facing. And we can now dissect this speech with our Chief Political Editor, Michaela Küfner. She's there in the Bundestag. She's listened into that statement of the Chancellor. Michaela, did Scholz hit the right notes there?
Well, he certainly made a major announcement, and that's nothing short of a Zeitenwende in German asylum policy if this actually happens the way the Chancellor just mapped it out, because he said that Germany would find ways to send asylum seekers who are criminals, who are guilty of severe crimes, back to Afghanistan. It sounds like potentially Syria as well. This would have to be a broader concept if it is to stand up in a court of law here in Germany, and it raises a whole host of legal questions. He has said that whoever abuses the security that is provided by Germany in terms of asylum should lose that right. Frankly, at the moment, that is not really something that is enshrined in international law. So it will be very interesting how he wants to pour this into a law that stands up. And we understand that the Interior Ministry is already working on legal ways to put this into place and is already speaking to neighboring countries of Afghanistan, because this would mean nothing else than the German government actually having to work with the Taliban regime, or at the very least, I take this as a hint, work with countries next to Afghanistan. So a lot of open questions here, but a clear message from the German Chancellor that those who attack democracy should have to fear and not everybody else.
Michaela, you mentioned the legal hurdles that he may be facing, or the government may be facing, but also are there still political hurdles inside the coalition government? For example, what will the position of the Greens be?
Yeah, this will be very interesting now how the Greens respond to this. What the German Chancellor also mapped out is, look, there are 20 million people with a migratory background in Germany. We are not going to let this become something that leads to division in society, to a suspicion of whoever is foreign, a suspicion of Muslims in Germany. This all comes, of course, under the impression of this fatal knife attack in Mannheim, where a 29-year-old policeman died after he was severely injured by an Islamist extremist whose asylum claim here in Germany had been rejected, and he was still allowed to stay in Germany for fear of his life if he was sent back to Afghanistan. Germany generally doesn't send asylum seekers back to Afghanistan or Syria at this moment in time because of the overall security situation in those countries. This is now the first time that we've heard from a German chancellor saying that the national security interest outweighs the individual interest of the security of any individual. And this is something that will have to stand the test of courts of law. I would expect a whole host of organizations who are working for the rights of asylum seekers here in Germany to challenge that immediately. But we're very early days here because we don't even know what kind of legal text we're facing. We know that political talks are apparently already underway with neighboring countries. I would suspect that that is Pakistan, but we'll see about that. We're due to learn more details. And then the big question is, how will this pan out within the coalition here in Germany? We already heard from his own Social Democrat Party that this is an option. The Free Democrat FDP also seem to be heading in that direction. But how the Greens will react to exactly this is the big question. This is all happening a few days ahead of European elections, which are actually already underway in the Netherlands, and how much of this will be political speak and how much of this will actually translate into an effective change of policy that is implementable is still very much an open question.
Michele, a second topic, not less important, that he turned to in his speech was, of course, the war in Ukraine. And there has been a bit of a U-turn in Germany's policy with regards to German weapons and how they're being used by Ukraine. What did he say about that?
Yes, this is a very interesting point. I must stress, though, that most of his statement, and it was billed as being on security, was about internal security. So that was very much reflecting the debate and the outrage here in Germany that something like this knife attack could happen. There was a second knife attack on a far-right AfD politician, but the attacker there is seen as someone who has psychological problems. So that doesn't really fit into that kind of concept that he was speaking about there. And there's been a whole stream of attacks, luckily not as severe, on politicians. So he also wants to create new criminal charges, so it is easier and for courts to actually address the issue of people who apply for office, who actually take on public responsibility to protect them and to actually see those charges reflected, to get hold of people and actually sentence them who launch such attacks. Then there's the issue of Ukraine. Here the German Chancellor is actually doing pretty well in the polls over his decision not to send cruise missiles. Germany's terrorist system, which is seen as state-of-the-art internationally, will not be sent to Ukraine. At the same time, faced with the situation in Kharkiv, Germany, as well as other allies, is allowing Ukraine now to use German weapons to also strike military targets only on Russian territory. And this has been the big fear in the past of the German Chancellor. Here he's now given way to actually a reality on the ground. And that also is seen as something that is a decision that, well, some criticize him that it's long overdue, and it also raises the question whether other decisions might be reverted, like the one on Taurus, in the future. There's the constant criticism of the German Chancellor internationally, but also here within his own coalition even, that he is always a bit out of pace with events. On the other hand, the German Chancellor says, look, I'm getting the credibility in the German public because they know I do not take such strategic decisions lightly, that he's always on the side of not letting this conflict that is now still between Ukraine and Russia only escalate into a wider conflict between NATO and Russia. That's the overarching fear, because this would have potentially uncontrollable things to follow and uncontrollable escalation heading into World War III territory. I mean, it's difficult to actually say the word, but that's essentially what it would be. And here, Olaf Scholz is always eager to portray himself as the peace chancellor who's erring on the side of caution. He also mentioned the reconstruction conference that is taking place here in Berlin next week, where many parties are essentially collecting money and concepts how to bolster Ukraine in this situation. Yes, reconstruction is needed, but there's also an acute sense of alarm that Russia is, of course, targeting facilities for energy supply, for instance, which are very costly and take time to build up. And the big question is how Ukraine's allies will prevent that reconstruction becoming null and void instantly unless they bolster Ukraine to the level where it can fend off Russia, strike it potentially on its own territory and prevent those very attacks from being launched. The German Chancellor only hinted at this issue, but that is something where he is eager to portray himself on the side of caution.
I'd like to come back to one other issue of domestic security. He also indicated that he will strengthen the possibilities of for people who glorify terrorism to be deported. What did he say about that? And that also applies probably to the demonstrations that we've seen that have been called anti-Semitic.
Well, there are actually two separate issues. We saw this attack in Mannheim, and we then saw one policeman died, and then this attack was glorified by several suspected Islamist extremists online. So and this actually sparked huge outrage here in Germany as well. And he clearly mapped out that in itself should become a criminal charge, because it isn't right now, and it limits the possibilities for courts to actually sentence on this. So that is something he included in the reasons for sending asylum seekers back. He also wants to see those who are German nationals and are guilty of what this new charge will become. At the moment, you just have agitation, public agitation, Volksverhetzung as a charge. He wants to see those really feel the pressure of the law. He says not the German public should have to fear, but those who actually attack a democracy. On anti-Semitism, there already has been a tightening of the law. So he said that it's only logical to do the same for extremists who agitate and glorify such violent attacks. And at the same time, he actually took quite a bit of time to ensure that he does not want to see, and he was pointing verbally at the far right, that he doesn't want to see this as a measure that can divide society, because the mainstream of people with migratory backgrounds are peaceful. They're contributing to this society. But those who attack it, he says, no longer have the right to be protected. And the really interesting question now will be how this will become law and how this will become implemented, because sending people back already is a huge challenge where the German government is struggling with many countries.
DW's Chief Political Editor, Michaela Küfner, thank you very much for your detailed analysis. You're watching DW News. Here's a reminder of our top story. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has addressed lawmakers in Parliament about security threats facing the country. Scholz said that Germany would fight terrorism in all forms following a number of politically motivated attacks here in Germany in recent weeks. He was speaking just days before Germany welcomes football fans from all over Europe for the month-long Euro 2024, with all its security challenges for the country. Scholz also reaffirmed Ukraine's right to defend itself against Russian aggression, including with weapons provided by Germany. He said there was no reason for anyone to fear an escalation of the conflict, and that his number one priority was that no one in Germany should ever have to experience war. And that's it from me and the news team for now. I'll be back at the top of the hour with more news.
Ukraine was like a stepping point to, pivot you into that world you want to be. Finish your studies.